So good morning, everyone. My name is Gustavo Licurgo. I'm a Global Executive MBA from INSEAD. And when we think about exploring renewables in Brazil, it's almost automatic. We think about hydrogen due to its low cost of production over there comparing with other countries. So now we would like to welcome a panel of experts that will give their inputs about this subject. So we will discuss building a low-carbon hydrogen industry, exporting perspectives to Brazil. And I would like to welcome Anne-Sophie Corbeau from the Global Research Scholar at Center on Global Energy Policy, Houcine Hamdi, Head of Business Development France at Siemens Energy, Ludmila Nascimento, Head of Business Head of Energy and Decarbonization Director at Vale, and Sebastien Clerc, CEO of Voltalia. Welcome. Ça manque une? Ok. Ah, pardon. On doit être 5. Mais ça, c'est pour le... Modérateur? Elle est où? Vamos chamá-la. Desculpa, gente. And Clarissa, she comes back to be the moderator.
Yeah, yes, it was not my fault, guys. It was, I was just helping the people to make sure that we have nice records for after. So thank you very much for joining me on this exciting panel. So we started mentioning hydrogen in the prior panel, but now have a full session on it. So I'm very happy to host it. Just before we start, I just want to do a quick quiz with you. It was not, I did not send it. It was on purpose. But it's Bruna, who worked with me, she asked me, please do it anyway, because it will be interesting. So 10 years ago, in 2014, how many times do you think the word hydrogen was mentioned in the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook report, which is a flagship for everybody that works with energy? Anne-Sophie, Houcine? Ludmila? Okay, Sebastien? Well, you're very good, because it was 0. So no mention 10 years ago in the World Energy Outlook to the world hydrogen. 2 years ago, in 22, how many times? You can give a range, Anne-Sophie.
Okay, 100.
100?
1,000.
1,000? Ludmila?
No, 500.
Okay.
I don't know. 500 as well.
So Ludmila and Sebastien, yeah, you had 543. So so you take the lead. So this is just really a very short notice to make the point that hydrogen has only been part of the energy transition conversation very recently. Although some scholars studied for a longer time. But it is an illustration on the extent to which hydrogen has been considered very recently as a response to a low-carbon transition. Expectations put it highly on the agenda, not for every sector decarbonization, mainly for the hard-to-abate industries. But anyway, according to the net zero scenarios provided by IEA, we should be producing 70 million tons of hydrogen by 2030, and we are very far away from that target. Last week, Bloomberg New Energy Finance just delivered, a very recent new outlook, according to which low-carbon hydrogen will only be at 16 million tons of production summing up green and blue hydrogen by 2030 compared to the 70 million that we need. And why is it so? Because we've, rising costs of electrolyzer, cost of financing, we mentioned in the last year, very low level of committed demand for hydrogen, and still remains to be seen the extent to which public policies will de facto support the development of this new industry. So this is what we will discuss among the five of us. And the way I will do is that I will run a common question to all of you to start with, and then address some specific questions, and we'll recap by final questions. So, Anne-Sophie, starting by you, looking at, and the question is the same. So looking at the future, is there a role for hydrogen in the global decarbonization? If yes, what is it? And if no, why?
Yes, there is a role for hydrogen, probably not the one which was depicted a few years ago when there was so much hype for hydrogen. I mean, if you believe some people, you put hydrogen absolutely everywhere. I don't think this is the case. For me, hydrogen is the third best solution after trying to reduce the final energy demand and try to electrify as much as you can with clean energy, clean electricity. So after that, when you are reaching the hard-to-abate sectors, so producing fertilizer, methanol, so all the chemicals, trying to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors, high-temperature sectors, and also the input in the maritime sectors. I mean, I need to mention that for me, hydrogen is also with the derivatives, so ammonia, methanol, etc. So you need also to look at the transport sector, and in particular, everything which is complicated to decarbonize and to electrify. So it has a role to play, but not the one which was depicted a few years ago.
And in what time frame would you say?
It's going to be much slower than people imagine. Also, I mean, when you were mentioning the 70 million ton, this is a net zero scenario. And yes, unfortunately, we are not on the path to net zero right now. So this is why the numbers are much lower. So Bloomberg mentioned 16 million ton by 2030. Right now, there is about 3 million ton, which is under FID, according to the World, to the Hydrogen Council. And that was as of October 2023. So yeah, it's going to be slower than people expected, simply because, well, one, the costs are for renewable hydrogen are much higher than people thought. They are actually going up because of higher financial costs, because of higher electrolyzer costs, and also because in some cases of renewables, like offshore wind, for example, the costs are also going higher. Also, people tend to dismiss the problem of demand, and now you have all this supply planned, which is looking for demand, very simply. And also, we are waiting for the regulation. I mean, 3 years to develop the definition of renewable hydrogen in Europe. And in the US, everybody is waiting not so much for the IRA final version, but for the election. No, for the elections, because they don't know. They don't know what part of the IRA is going to remain if Trump is going to be elected. And it's very likely that some part of the 45E, which is defining the clean hydrogen production tax credits, especially for renewable hydrogen, is probably not going to remain as defined today.
Very interesting thoughts to start with. Houcine, is there a role for hydrogen?
As a matter of fact, I'm a strong believer there is a role of hydrogen in the decarbonization strategy. Maybe to make it a bit quick, I would like as well to introduce who is Siemens Energy and what we are supposed to do and what contribution we want to play in the hydrogen space. So basically, we were formed like almost 4 years ago as a spin-off from the Siemens group to basically dedicate our technologies to the energy transition space. And from this perspective, we have a very large spectrum of portfolio. We are a 90,000 employees large corporation for 30 billion euros turnover. And from this perspective, we look at the decarbonization of the economy from a wide scale. So it starts with the fact that the economy is highly dominated by oil and gas. So the first thing is to start with the carbon capture. And this is where we come into play with our CO2 compression and solutions that we propose to the market. The second thing is that, as it was said previously, we need to get the power generation mix as well, be much more turned to green. And from this perspective, we do as well have a various solutions, including wind turbines from our division Siemens Gamesa. And then when we do have these electrons, green electrons available, the point is to electrify as much as possible the use cases and the processes. So electrification means to us as well grid connectivity, and we do have in our portfolio grid transmission solutions in terms of HVDC platforms if we are to connect countries, regions at a large scale, but as well other kind of technologies. And once we are here, we have to acknowledge the fact that in the range of 60% of CO2 emissions are coming from industry, mobility, building sector, which are very difficult to electrify, and sometimes it's even impossible. And this is where molecules are required. And the molecules basically needs to be turned green by usage of these electrons, and so this is where hydrogen is related. So in our point of view, there is no energy transition without green molecules. In this circumstance, basically, there is the International Energy Agency report, which stated that by 2050, of course, it's an outlook, but the order of magnitude is that the economy would be covering its energy needs with like 50% of electricity, which still leaves in the range of 50% of fuels and molecules that are required. So here, green molecules have definitely a strong role to play. And the other thing that was mentioned as well in the previous panel is that the world is going definitely to need energy all over. And so the energy-rich country where you have abundant green molecules, in large quantity, can definitely supply the rest of the world. And hydrogen and molecules are a fantastic way to transport in very large quantities this energy.
So you're maybe slightly more optimistic than Anne-Sophie. Maybe.
As a matter of fact, we are significantly investing there. So it's all about facing the reality, which is hard. I think we are going to come to that point in a few minutes. But in the same time, we want to be drivers. We want to be here and transform the economy. So it's not going to be easy, but it's a journey.
Okay, thank you, Houcine. Ludmila, is there a role for hydrogen in the global decarbonization?
Definitely yes, particularly as you mentioned for the hard-to-abate sectors, such as steel, which is in our value chain, fertilizers and long distance. So there are a number of sectors which hydrogen remains most viable, and I kind of agree with Anne-Sophie, a little bit more optimistic. But also some industries that today relies on ammonia, for instance, and they apply the gray hydrogen. It also could be a shift to the green hydrogen. And as Houcine is explaining, the green hydrogen molecules is a potential game changer, yes, because you can store it and then you can build pipelines and then move it around. So this is really important, and it can be employed in a wide range of industries, as I mentioned before, steel, long distance, as ships and aircraft. So this is really important because unfortunately electrification will not be able for those sectors. And while many challenges regarding costs, as Anne-Sophie mentioned, and also technologies exist, hydrogen is still most valuable for those sectors.
So thank you very much, and we'll come to the role of Vale as a potential off-taker in a while, because demand is highly needed. But Sebastien, handing it over to you.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. Yes, I think hydrogen has a role. There is no doubt that there will be some green hydrogen playing a role. The question is how much and when. Certainly less than when we will have less hydrogen that versus what was discussed a few years ago. And I'm not a big believer in some of the new uses thought for hydrogen, like planes and so on, cars and storage on the grid, and all that was really not making so much sense. But there is so much hydrogen that we consume already that needs to go greener than today. That it's a matter of degree. So the answer is yes. I think and we should just see green hydrogen as a curve coming from close to zero to an unknown level, and this curve will be already a big volume in 5 years and 10 years and so on.
Thank you very much. So to wrap up this first round of question, yes, there is a role for hydrogen, and whenever I mention hydrogen, I'm meaning low carbon hydrogen, whether it's green or blue, because Anne-Sophie doesn't like the colors, so we'll refer to low carbon hydrogen. But so the conclusion is that we will not be able to electrify whatever needs to be decarbonized, and in this context, there is a role, yes, for low carbon hydrogen. Even if it's complex, it might take longer than expected. It might be costlier, but it has a role. So building on that, Anne-Sophie, and you are based in Paris, but you're also affiliated to the Columbia Global Energy Policy. I always mix the name, but center in Colombia. So what lessons can Brazilian companies and investors and policymakers consider from the European context when building up, what is needed for a hydrogen economy?
Well, first of all, don't think that Europe as a whole wants to import. Okay, I'm going to precise that. If I'm looking at the 58 strategies which had been published as of April 2024, there were 12 countries which have said we want to import hydrogen, including quite a few European countries, and of course everybody has heard about Germany. But France is considering imports, not quite decided. You have also Japan, Korea, Singapore. A few countries have not made any decision, including China, which is very important given the size of China. And then you have 42 countries which want to export, including Brazil. So make no mistake, the competition is going to be tough. And the pie may not be as big as you think, because yes, Europe said we want to import 10 million tons of clean hydrogen by 2030. No chance, okay? This is not going to happen. There is never going to be that much of demand by 2030. This number was, I don't know, came up, okay, in the REPowerEU framework. They didn't know what to put, so they put a much higher number, as if the previous one was not already extremely difficult to reach. So, be selfish, look at your demand, your domestic demand first, decarbonize your economy first, look at, new sectors that you want to export first. So build up your industrial capabilities. And in particular, the second point is that hydrogen is extremely complicated to transport. People have not decided yet how to transport that. So you have liquid hydrogen, you have LOHC, you have ammonia, you have methanol, and you have also things like green steel, which I'm sure some people are very interested in. But the point is, green steel made of hydrogen is infinitely easier to transport than any other kind of molecule. So I would say, well, it may be a bad news for the European industry, but definitely it's much easier in general from a logistics point of view. The second advice, looking at all the things that we have done in Europe, is make it simple. Don't spend 3 years trying to define renewable hydrogen, and apparently we are going to spend another couple of years maybe trying to define what low carbon hydrogen is, meaning based on natural gas plus CCUS based, or God forbid, based on nuclear energy. Only the French can understand how painful it is to try to use nuclear energy to produce hydrogen. Believe me, you are going to have a very long discussions in Brussels. So make it simple. Don't embark in a very complex regulatory environment. However, if you want to export something, well, then Europe is going to be a very important market, because it will be one of the 2 regional markets which want to import something, along with Japan, Korea, and Singapore. So they will have some influence. I think the Japanese and the Koreans are much more relaxed about the whole thing on carbon intensity. They have a carbon intensity benchmark, which is actually similar to the one in Europe, but they are not very strict about the whole 3 pillars and the additionality criteria. You in Brazil, actually, you are very well placed because of the electricity, which is actually 90+% green. So you are okay. You are okay. the final thing that I would say is the most important thing about hydrogen is the carbon intensity, which is exactly why I don't like to talk about the colors. So as long as you are striving to decarbonize and you are producing low carbon intensity hydrogen, whatever you want to call it, then this is the most important thing. And of course, it needs to be as cheap as possible, so but be pragmatic.
Thank you very much, because you laid out very practical advices, and I hope that we'll have the notes from this panel, because they are really, really very useful, and I'm sure that all the policymakers that are here, including Luciana, will take them into consideration. So keep it simple, focus on your local market, but be able to tackle also external markets, so according to their rules, and this is very important. Houcine, you mentioned Siemens Energy as a spin-off of Siemens. You were one of the first to invest in the value chain. You have a very important manufacturing of electrolyzer. Bill Gates visited it very recently. Congratulations on that. But what are the main factors? And you can, go from geopolitical to macroeconomics, hindering the market development at a higher speed and scale.
So as a matter of fact, as it has been said, we are in a situation that there have been many announcements on the market, many intentions that have been formulated, and goals, very ambitious goals that have been set. The reality is that today, the worldwide installed capacity in electrolysis is in the range of 1 gigawatt of systems, whereas the targets set for 2030 are in the range of 300 gigawatts. So there's a factor 250 in the between. And we have basically to acknowledge the reality. Yes, it's going to be very, very challenging to meet those targets. So we need then to move from talks to doing things. And this is basically about contribution. And our contribution, as you mentioned, is definitely that it's about, on one hand, bringing technology to the market. And technology in the sense of reliable technology that they are going to give to users and operators the ability to operate them. Let's think, as Sebastien mentioned, that there is already hydrogen used on the market at in very large scale quantities. So we talked about over 90 million tons of hydrogens currently operated per year. So substituting already this...
Not low carbon, just
fossil hydrogen. I'm talking about fossil hydrogen, that already substituting this fossil hydrogen with green hydrogen is already creating a significant market. But this is the starting point. So as a matter of fact, we are here considering bringing reliable technology to the market. And we have already 16 megawatts of electrolyzer installed in the field and being operated. We have already 400 megawatts of projects under execution. And this is super important for us to access to data, to improve technology, and this is basically our core business, and this is what we are currently doing. The second thing is as well to have the suited infrastructure to make it happen. One way we will talk about competitiveness, but one way to manage competitiveness is to upscale and go for massification. So we came from having like a mid-size factory to build the first generation of electrolyzers we've put on the market like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And now we move to the next level, which is gigafactory scale. And we have already capabilities to produce up to 3 gigawatts of electrolyzers per year. So considering the targets that have been set for 2030 in Europe, we would be capable of delivering half of European needs, 20 gigawatts compared to 40. So basically, infrastructure is super important to upscale, but we cannot do it alone. We need partners and we need strong partnerships. And this is what we have been working on, and successfully we have realized a joint venture with the French Air Liquide company, who is basically a super important actor in the field of molecules and already fossil hydrogen molecules. So this is basically Siemens Energy and Air Liquide bringing together expertise on the electric side and combining it to the molecule side, which makes perfect sense as far as green hydrogen is concerned. And in this space, we are already working on one of the largest electrolyzer plants in the world, which happened in France, the Normandy project, 200 megawatt size. And this is currently under execution. We work with other big players like BASF.
Together with Air Liquide.
Together with Air Liquide, absolutely. And we work with big players like BASF, Ørsted, Maersk in various fields, transportation, chemical industry, and so on. But the most important thing, and it was touched several times before, is basically to set the right framework conditions to make it happen. We need policymakers basically to support the fact that we need the existing framework to support a robust business case for green hydrogen that will enable private investment to come into play. So to make it quick, I don't know if I have enough time, but in 4 points, I would say that it starts first with optimizing the framework condition. It was said we need to make it much simpler. And we need to make it basically as well at a faster pace, which must be simpler and quicker. The second thing is to provide incentives to the key off-takers and to the key off-take needs that we have. So it's all about quotas, carbon contracts for differences, and close the gap between basically what the market is willing to pay for. The third thing is to make, let's say, improving the access to financing system and financial support. So the cost of capital is super important, and finding the right conditions to make it affordable and make it, let's say, predictable for the business models to happen. This is as well about receiving state guarantees, which are as well going to be of great help to de-risk projects. And last but not least, we talk about the market focused on the production side, on the production infrastructure, but basically the hydrogen economy is much more than that. So we have to look at basically the distribution networks, the pipeline networks. We need to look at the ships, the terminals that are required. We've been talking about export, storage capabilities, and so on. So there's definitely a large spectrum of things where we need to invest in. Combining that, the investors who need predictability, they would be able to assess much better the benefits and the risks before entering and committing to investing.
So basically, your dream would be to have such an organized, I would say, industry as the power already counts on, at least here in Europe and in Brazil, for instance, with infrastructure provided, a regulatory framework that is ready, off-takers, generators, and risks that are to be taken into consideration by each player. So a little bit of requirements are there, but still a lot of work to be done, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you, Houcine. Ludmila, you are with Vale, responsible for decarbonization. Hydrogen is one of your priorities at Vale for decarbonizing. But low carbon hydrogen demand is still uncertain, as we realize very clearly this morning. So in this context, what is missing for Vale, for instance, as a potential off-taker, really to take final investment decision?
Oh, perfect, Clarissa. It will be a little bit repetitive, as you just mentioned, but just to give some numbers, indeed, a number of announcement projects for low carbon hydrogen production really increased in Brazil. If I'm not mistaken, more than 80% projects were announced. And according to the International Energy Agency, we could reach 38 million tons by 2030. Around 50%, 45% projects in the early stage development. This is actually a problem for 2030. However, all those 38 million tons, only 4% has reached the final decision agreement. And people might ask, why is that? So the first thing we understood is that we really need to implement a regulatory framework for this low emission hydrogen. The point is that most governments, they are pushing for production and not for the consumption. So what is one thing that is missing is the how can we get these incentives for the consumption? So to foster demand, it's really important. Just give you an example. I think Houcine mentioned this price for difference, right, as a mechanism. This is really important because unfortunately we cannot reach the prices of fossil fuels today applying the old rules. So it's really important to get these to foster not only the demand but also then the production. So the second thing is the certification. I think the international cooperation is needed in order to accelerate all the solutions, right? And also and so this is the second missing part. And the third one is the licensing and the permitting. We haven't mentioned that here, but it's really important that we could come projects on the stream. And we know that this is pretty much everywhere in the world. This licensing and permitting is a barrier, important, because some projects would take 5 years, even more, right, to come on a stream, depending on the environmental licensing and also to put everything together, considering communities and everything. So this is also very important if you really want to bring all this amount of hydrogen by 2040 maybe, or 2050. So this is really important. There is one challenge also that Anne-Sophie mentioned in the beginning, which is the inflation pressure on the cost of the projects. So as probably you are aware, the hydrogen cost 60 to 7% is energy, green, mostly green energy, and the 30 and 40% is the electrolyzers. And we are facing a huge inflationary pressure on the solar panels and the wind turbines, and also on the electrolyzers. So this is also important. And just to give you a flavor of numbers, for the steel industry to make hydrogen viable for its solution in the electric route, it would require a cost of hydrogen around $2 a ton, a kilo. Yeah. So and yeah, it's very challenging. So that needs a energy price around $25 to $30 a megawatt hour. And electrolyzer around 750 kilowatt hour, which is only possible in China these days. So this is really important for us to understand, and how can we really either for the contract for difference or to fostering other kind of a demand there to come on the stream those projects. And also incentivize these industries, such as steel, but maybe fertilizers and others, to adopt, for instance, hydrogen as a solution for the near future, I would say.
Thank you, Ludmila. So you mentioned the steel industry, but obviously Vale is part of the steel industry. But you didn't respond immediately to my question, which is, what would need to be, really addressed in Brazil, for instance, for Vale to advance its commitments?
Oh, perfect. Let me explain then, because Vale is working in these two different scopes, right? First one is scope 1. So we have different options for our, particularly the scope 1 solutions. And one of those is to replace the diesel on the railroad to green ammonia. So this is one thing. And the other one is working very closely to the clients for the scope 3, which accounts for 98% of our total emissions. The steel industry, just to give you some numbers, scope 1 and 2 is around 40 million tons of CO2. Scope 3 is 590 million tons of CO2, so it's a big difference. So we are working very closely to the steel companies, and Vale is developing some products. I'll take a little bit time here just to explain, but some green products such as the green briquettes, and this is really important because it can allow the steel industry to move from the blast furnaces, which is the standard, to the electric route. And with that, there is this process called the direct reduction that today applies natural gas, and the idea is to replace that to hydrogen. So what is the idea? That we could attract the clients to Brazil to produce the HBI, which is a hot briquette iron that is used in the electric furnace. And it can be exported as a green molecule, somebody said that, to the Europe or Japan or, and Korea, to continue this decarbonization on the steel sector. So going back to your question, what is missing in Brazil? The first thing is really the regulatory framework. We've been discussing internally in Brazil the hydrogen bill.
Yeah.
Right, and as well as the carbon market. So this is really important that we have that in place that could really bring the investors and de-risk, right, the projects. This is the first one. The second one is to work with the government on what kind of incentives. And what we've discovered is that in Brazil we have a very competitive energy price, with some adjustments in terms of the sector charges, but very competitive. And but still, we will need some price difference to bring down the cost to $2 a kilo. So this is the most important thing for the moment. And after that, the permitting and licensing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for providing these additional clarifications. Sebastien, Ludmila mentioned that 60 to 70% of the cost of producing hydrogen has to do with renewable power. Firstly, do you agree with that? And to what extent is this competitive renewable power key to unlock, investments in low carbon hydrogen?
Thank you. I'll start saying a few words about Voltalia because we are not as well known as some of the neighbors. So we are active in the world of renewables, mostly wind and solar, and more batteries. We develop sites that will produce electricity, then we build them, then we operate them. And we do that both on our own balance sheet, where we own the plants, and other people's balance sheet for whom we do all of that. We are present in Europe, we are a French company, in Africa, and last but not least in Latin America. Our biggest country is Brazil. In Brazil, we've been present since 2007. We have developed close to 4 gigawatts of plants that are in operation today, of which we kept 1.6 gigawatt on our own balance sheet. Renewables, yes, indeed, is the majority of the cost of low carbon hydrogen. And this is why if we are good at producing renewables, we are the ones who will play the biggest role in the value chains to bring cheap, low carbon hydrogen. So yes, indeed, renewables will unlock the sector, but how precisely? Well, we are trying already to unlock for a few years because we are not completely sure about what will be the regulation in this country, what will be the subsidies in this other one, what will be this and that. But what we do know is that there will be a need for the most competitive renewable sites coupled with cost-effective, ready-to-export sites for not the hydrogen, for sure, probably the ammonia and the methanol, and probably even better steel and fertilizers. So what are we doing? We are, right as we speak, in 2 countries, Brazil and Egypt, but let's concentrate on Brazil, developing very large multi-gigawatts sites of solar and wind, like we've been doing forever, except before it was for other usages. But there we develop sites that are everywhere on the grid, but also next to the future sites of producing hydrogen, with direct connection, not going through the grid, and then developing also the sites where you will have the electrolyzer. Because we know this development of renewables and the hydrogen site takes time. So we started. We know for sure. So it's a rational business decision to develop these sites already, like we've been doing for almost 3 years, in these two countries. In Brazil, we picked a few areas, but the one which is most advanced are the sites next to the port of Pecém, where we've signed partnerships and to secure land on this in the harbor and sites neighboring that, and progressively getting the permits, the connection, and the utilities and everything to be ready for that. So this will definitely unlock, because I think our sector can bring cheap green electricity, but it can bring something else that is very useful, which is an entrepreneurial approach to site development. So whether it will be in 2030 or before or after, or both, we will have sites ready to be built to produce low carbon hydrogen.
Very interesting. Would you explain to the audience, why you're more bullish? And I'm supposing that you're more bullish about Brazil than other countries.
Our approach to hydrogen is to think that some countries will produce very little hydrogen, and we need to import. For instance, France, because France has not enough wind, not enough sun, too small sites to get economies of scale. Some other countries might be self-sufficient, let's say the US, with a lot of subsidies or very little subsidies, depending on the quality of the sites. And some other countries might or might not be self-sufficient, but definitely will be good exporting countries. What are these countries? Those who have world record in terms of wind speed, and world record or close to it for solar, and desertic areas where you can have huge sites. And our biggest wind and solar site in Brazil is 55 kilometers long and 15 kilometers wide, which is not for hydrogen, but is now in operation. So a lot of economies of scale. And a harbor where you can export whatever fertilizer or anything that is easy to be moved. Brazil probably has all of that, but unfortunately has other things that come into the column of minuses. What is that? Protectionism, which makes that turbines in Brazil cost more than turbines in France. Taxes and all sort of things on the grid when we cannot connect directly the Pecém site to the rest of the grid. And a few other things that I will not mention because I love too much Brazilians. Which means we need to be. I think Brazil has to be very careful to be to minimize the disadvantages, because the advantages are there. They are not going to go away, but we have to be careful to minimize the problems in order to stay cost competitive.
Thank you. Thank you very much for providing these very insightful comments. And then the last question for all of you to address, although I believe that some of the answers have already been provided throughout our conversation, but if you could add additional aspects, if you could summarize in one or maybe two short, aspects, what would be the most important challenges to be tackled in the low carbon hydrogen landscape? What would those two, let's say, up to two aspects, and why?
I think the demand one is the most important because it has been dismissed before, and you need to find, there might be different approaches, but how to incentivize hydrogen demand or demand for hydrogen derivatives. And yes, we have mentioned CFD. It can also be, for example, countries' requirements for using X amount of green steel or certain products which are green. It can be also maybe helping also on again the supply side, so or the demand side. So let's say we have some industrials, they want to decarbonize, but they are feeling a little bit short in terms of capex. So you are helping them with capex. There are many different ways. It can be also like the European Union has done. Okay, well you need to use about 42% of low carbon hydrogen by 2030. So you are basically giving a certain amount of low carbon hydrogen by a certain deadline. We don't know yet how this is going to trickle down to different countries, but there is a target. So that's number one. I think just to come back to what I have heard here, we are in the danger of focusing really on renewable hydrogen and dismissing low carbon hydrogen. I would like to say that low carbon hydrogen has had a tendency over the past couple of months to come back from the behind door because hey, it's cheaper. Okay, you can say we are not ready in terms of CCUS, but at the end of the day...
So just sharing with the audience what you are referring to,
so
maybe?
This is an hydrogen which is based on natural gas, but basically you are also capturing the CO2. So you are doing the same process as we are doing for most of the hydrogen which is done today, produced today, but you are adding CCUS. And this one is slowly coming back because it's cheaper. Because renewable hydrogen, the cost has been doing that, and the cost of natural gas, well, I mean, it depends which country you are looking. But, when you are seeing that the European Commission itself is looking again at CCUS, and this is not a swear word, and that even Germany is considering that as, a kind of bridge towards renewable hydrogen in the end, things are changing, slowly.
Thank you. So demand, maybe... CapEx funding together with these signals of demand, but also allowing for different technology routes. Okay, thank you. Anne-Sophie. Houcine?
So basically, I, of course, fully share what has just been said. I would insist on the competitiveness thing, which is, of course, highly related to the demand amount. But on the competitiveness part, we basically have seen over the past months, years, a significant rise in costs. So we talk about basically cost and cost expectations have risen by more or less 30%, which is really significant. And from this perspective, we are engaged into first, again, making the technology, and we have a technology roadmap, make it more efficient, make it more reliable so that it impacts significantly in terms of efficiency what the associated competitiveness points could be brought to the business case. We are currently today talking about generating hydrogen in the range of $4.5 up to $6 per kilogram. And we would need to definitely divide that at least by two. To make it affordable, and there might always be this little bonus that some off-takers are willing to pay to basically engage in comparison to fossil products, but still the road is a journey, and we need to work on that. So again, it's all about upscaling the whole economy, and out of that create economies of scale. So like I said, we have been engaging into that, and the more we can as well work together and optimize processes with partners, sharing knowledge, sharing know-how, and jointly together identifying the best ways in advance, ahead of making the projects, how to make them cost competitive. It is really super helpful, and this is a totally different approach to what the market has been doing so far with the customer-supplier relationship, work in partnership mode, way in advance to make it happen. So, yeah, this is what I can contribute.
Thank you. So, upscaling and bringing costs down through strong partnerships. Ludmila.
I totally agree with both of them. But firstly, I think the demand, to foster demand, is the most important for the time being. And also that comes with the incentives, the proper incentives in order to foster this demand, while we could find a ways to reduce costs, scaling up production. And just a very quick comment on what Anne-Sophie said, that it's important to consider, yes, the blue hydrogen considering the natural gas with CCUS, but it's really important where, what kind of regions are you looking at it? And in the case of Brazil, this is really not a possibility. So Brazil can really leapfrog to hydrogen, to green hydrogen, and then maybe capture some green premiums in, let's say, near midterm. So,
thank you, thank you.
So since I agree with a lot what has been said, I'll add another thing, which is that we need more doers, not thinking too much, but acting. This is, and I say that having in mind what happens in China, for instance. Right now, China doesn't export much fertilizers, for instance, for obvious reasons. But if now fertilizer is made out of wind and sun, don't get it wrong. They will capture that market very fast because they just are doers. And that's what I think is right now the most important part. It's just let's do it. Brazil is very well positioned for that. And sometime soon, Brazil will export a lot of green stuff made out of hydrogen.
Thank you. I would only add one one aspect is that the world can pay for a green premium. And when we mention the world from this side, I would say, of the Atlantic Ocean, we mean the developed countries paying for the green premium. So we invite all of the developed countries-based company to allow for the paying for the carbon content of the products they buy from Brazil. And there's a clear call to action, not make it too complex, right, Anne-Sophie? Do it through partnerships, but definitely providing the clear rules and upscale this production. So there's a phone ringing and reminding that we are coming to a close of the session. So thank you very much.